Hey Naruto and Deku fans, I've just launched something special just for you, a Patreon page packed with exclusive 18+ content featuring Naruto and Deku. If you're craving mature, intense stories including those spicy lemons, you won't want to miss this. This is your chance to dive into the deeper, perverted sides of these characters. So, what are you waiting for? Join my Patreon now and be the first to experience the content you've been waiting for.
Greetings from the SHIGARAKI family. Before the video begins, I am grateful to the original author for granting us permission to incorporate their work into our video. I am extremely grateful. The description contains the work of the original author. We will now proceed to the video. Izuku becomes a Mobian That's it. NINJ 45 word. Izuku was walking towards UA. He had been training himself for the last 10 months of his life, all for the moment he would need to enter the school and prove to everyone around him that a quirkless hero really is possible. He would even prove that to All Might himself. It had been 10 months since Izuku had last seen the #1 hero, and he made it his mission that if he walked around his normal routes to get to school as well as the store over that time that he wasn't near the man. He had really crushed his dreams of becoming a hero that day 10 months ago, and he really didn't want to talk to the hero about it, especially now of all times. He reached into his backpack to get some water as he wanted to be fully ready for the entrance exams. Even if he didn't pass the practical, considering he'd be fighting against robots. He had read about the practical exams on the website talking about UA's entrance exams about 4 years ago, when they made it possible for the quirkless to enter that prestigious school. He was mentally prepared to take the general education test as well in case he didn't get into the heroics course. And as he walked through the city on his way to the train station to get to Tokyo, an explosion happened to his right. Looking over at the area where a wall was broken apart, he found that there was a civilian laying under some rubble as he rushed over to them before his mind could even process what was happening. Pulling the rubble off the civilian, he found that the man was bleeding from his head as Izuku managed to pull them out. "Why, young man W, what are you doing here?" the older man asked. "I'm here to get you out of here," Izuku said, with a small grin. "Well, keep yourself hidden. There are villains in the building," the older fellow said, as Izuku hauled the man to the street and called for paramedics and heroes. "How many villains are inside the building, sir?" Izuku asked, as the man coughed. There should be around 5 villains. But you should really be focused on the one in front of you," the older fellow said, as he grunted in pain. What are you talking about? "There's nobody in front of me," Izuku said, before the older fellow's face became a sneer. "I always love messing with the righteous ones," the older fellow said, as he placed all 5 of his fingers on Izuku's chest. Izuku had only a few moments to think about what was happening before the effects of a quirk activated. He felt as though all his bones were becoming mush as well as his body shrinking in size before he became a splatter of blood on the ground near the man on the ground. He smirked to himself as he got up from the ground, shaking off the remaining dust and debris as he walked back towards the building as he called out to his allies in the building. "Hey, we got a witness outside that I just took care of. Be careful," the man said, as the others gave him a smirk and ran up the stairs to begin their purge. Equals 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 equals. Izuku stared off into the distance as he thought about everything in his life building up to that moment in time. He seriously couldn't believe that was how he went out. He died because of the fact that he thought that an older gentleman was hurt and he was taken advantage of. He slowly began to cry as to how his mother would now become very distraught with the death of her son. Not that he really believed that she would be sad. He'd seen how she was very dismissive of him over the years when it came to his classes at school. She knew about how he was bullied every day, and she still did nothing about it. He had even attempted to tell her about it, but she was very drunk at the time and just yelled at him to just leave her alone. As he stared at the glowing world around himself, he thought about what kind of life he could get. Kaken got what he wanted from Izuku. He had died in order to make the boy's life much better. He just wished that it didn't come at the cost of thinking he'd saved the life of an elderly man. Shaking his head to get out of the strange thoughts of self-deprecation, Izuku had looked at the glowing light in the distance as he started to walk towards it. He had no idea what that would do for him, considering the fact that his entire body feels weightless and at the same time he was feeling pain all over his body, but that was par for the course for a life he lived. By the time he reached out for the light at the end of the weird empty void, he suddenly felt his entire body begin to break apart as he suddenly disappeared from the void. Dr. Robotnik was sleeping in his bedroom, as it was around midnight at the moment. Evil can't do more evil if they aren't getting enough sleep after all. He was having the greatest dream of his life as he thought about terraforming the entire world of Mobius into a robotic paradise where everything can survive anything that the universe can throw at it. And he had managed to catch that damn rat of a hedgehog Sonic in one of his many devices that could handle the power of the Chaos Emeralds. He slammed a button in the dream to transform Sonic into a metallic version of himself as he began to laugh hysterically at how he managed to finally defeat the blasted hedgehog once and for all. Beep, 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 beep. Gaia arg. Robotnik screamed in fear as he fell from his bed. What the hell is going on out there? He called out, gathering his clothes and putting them on. Looking at the time on his alarm clock showed that it was only 3 in the morning for him as he grumbled to himself leaving his bedroom. Entering the hall, he found himself staring at a scene that could be comedic for him as he just stared at the scene before him as he saw an unconscious green Mobian sleeping in the middle of one of his traps. Placing a hand over his face and rubbing it down his mustache, he walked over to the tube that held the Mobian as he tapped on the tube itself to see if he could wake them up. Nothing happened each time he tapped on the tube, so pulling it away, he reached out to the Mobian and poked his body. Soliciting a groan of pain and discomfort from the small being, he watched as they slowly sat upright as their ears flopped over their face adorably. That was if he could call the action adorable. Where am I? The small creature asked as he took in his surroundings. Welcome to the new base of operations for the glorious Dr. Robotnik. Robotnik called out, throwing his arms out. Who are you? Izuku asked as the man just turned white in color. Don't tell me that you've never heard of me, brat. I'm the great and indespicable Dr. Ivo Robotnik, otherwise known as Dr. Eggman by that filthy hedgehog and his friends. Dr. Eggman said as he grumbled, scuffling his foot on the tiles. I've never heard of you, sir. Do you know where I am? The small Mobian asked, confusedly. Are you sure that you want me to answer that question for you? You are on Mobius within my base of operations. Now are you working with that dreaded chipmunk Sally Acorn? Eggman questioned as he glared into the bunny's eyes with his goggle-covered eyes. And Mobius? What are you talking about? I was on Earth before I woke up here. Wait, why do I have fur instead of regular fleshy arms? The small Mobian screeched in clear confusion and fear. Eggman thought about how to answer the boy's question before he had a thought of his own. What was this boy doing in his building, and what could he do to gain their trust? Shaking his head, he just decided that it wasn't worth it to stay awake any further and just grabbed the Mobian by the ears and dragged them through the halls. All the while, the small Mobian had just been struggling to get away from his grasp as he pointlessly struggled in his arms the entire time. By the time Eggman had made it to the outside of his base, he tossed the small Mobian out of his base before slamming the door. Not before he left the small creature with a final set of words for the evening. If you don't want to be killed by me, just head over to those dreaded hedgehogs. I don't have time to deal with you at 3 in the morning, Eggman said, as the small Mobian had rushed away from the place in a hurry. Izuku ran through the woods near the base of operations that belonged to the weird scientist Eggman. He had no idea why he had this innate fear of the man, but he really didn't want to piss him off further. So he followed the man's directions. He was kind of like Kakin, except he didn't use a quirk. But aside from that, the small bunny boy had rushed through the forest as fast as he could as his ears flopped in front of his face. He was running through every single scenario about what in the world was happening, but he kept drawing into one singular scenario that he'd never thought was possible. He was probably reincarnated into another world to live out the rest of his days there. By the time he had run out of stamina to continue running through the forest, he stopped to hide in a tree. It was in the middle of the night, so he wanted to get as much sleep as possible in order to have enough energy to continue exploring what this world has to offer. If he was in another world, He was definitely going to see if certain things were helpful or not. And he was going to head to this hedgehog and his friends to see what they were all about. Falling asleep on the branch, he was currently unaware of the set of eyes that glared at him through the bush of leaves at the bottom of the tree as he cuddled himself against the trunk of it. By the time it was early morning, Izuku woke up with a start as he looked around his area before noticing a weird animal staring at him on the tree branch. They were like a snake, but for some reason they were opening their mouth towards him before he immediately entered fight or flight mode, which for him was the latter. Running down the tree, Izuku immediately took off in a dead sprint to get away from the area of that animal that attempted to have him for breakfast. As he continued to run through the forest, he wasn't paying attention to where he was rushing off to as he finally reached the outside of it before he quite literally jumped off the ledge. Aeawiawa! Izuku screamed as he fell into the watery river at the bottom of the cliff. And before he could even attempt to escape from the water, he was taken downstream, screaming the entire way as he struggled to swim in the roaring rapids as they tugged him down even further down the river as he struggled to keep himself above the water's surface. About a minute later, his head hit a rock, causing him to go unconscious from the harsh smack, and the river carried him down the stream. A few hours later, Izuku found himself on the bank of the river as he slowly got himself up from where he was laying on the ground. Shaking the water from his body, he looked at his form in the river's reflective surface and made multiple observations. Firstly, was the fact that he looked like one of those plushy bunnies that were stuffed animals. Secondly, he had weirdly oversized ears on top of his head, and the final thing he'd observed was the fact that since he was now a bunny, his eyes were definitely larger than normal. He decided to check under his pants to see what he looked like, since he wasn't exactly human anymore, and was very disturbed by how he looked. And with a blushing face, he pulled his face away from his crotch as he shook his head thinking about what to do in this world. Since he couldn't find a feasible way back to his old world, he thought about just staying within this world. It couldn't be that hard to live here in the wilderness, right? For the last time, Amy, I can't take you out on a date today. I've got a big project with the tornado that needs my full attention. A very young voice called out. Tails, goddammit. I want you attention and I want it now. A feminine voice called out as Izuku hid in the brush nearby. Who are they? I hope they are nicer than they sound. Izuku thought to himself as he watched the two enter near the river. Amy, I will spend time with you later. I need to see what the scanner stated about something appearing near the riverfront. That's weird. It said that a life form was nearby. I wonder if it's broken, the fox said as he swished his tails behind himself. Tails, you sure that there was something here? A pink hedgehog asked as she stared at the fox. The scanner is never wrong. Let me give it another shot. The fox, Tails said as he pulled out the device. As he turned the machine on, Izuku felt his heart rate increase dramatically as he hid within the brush as he curled in on himself as much as he could. And that was when he heard movement near him as he opened an eye to see two pairs of eyes staring at him in shock and confusion as he stared at them, whilst he hyperventilated at how they stared at him, blocking the sun. See, Amy, I told you that my scanner cannot be broken, Tails said as he jumped into the air. Hey, are you all right? You seem to be having a slight panic attack, Amy asked as she ignored Tails. Why, yeah. I am fine. But where am I? Izuku asked as he stared at the two fearfully. Don't worry, little guy. Big sister Amy is here to help you find your way around here, Amy said, picking Izuku up from his seated position. Why you don't seem that much older than me? Izuku muttered. HM? How old are you anyway? She asked as Izuku shuffled his feet. I am 14, Izuku said, looking away. Really? I'm 15, but that is just surprising, Amy said as she looked at Tails. I'm 14 as well. Nice to meet you, Tails said, holding a hand out. Emitaria Izuku, Izuku said, shyly taking the hand. Nice to meet you, Izuku. Name's Miles Tails Prower, but you can just call me Tails, Tails said with a smile. Why you're named after miles per hour? Izuku asked, confused. Yep. Anyway, this here is Amy Rose. She's my girlfriend, Tails said, happily. A girlfriend that you're not spending time with, Amy said, as she smacked Tails on the head. Izuku watched the two converse with one another as they led him towards where a small city was located. As they talked to one another, Izuku found himself falling into the conversation without much help as he listened to everything they all spoke about and taking it to heart immediately. And soon enough they stood over a very large city that looked highly advanced in terms of overall technology alone. And that is when someone new arrived as he had overheard the trio walking towards the cliff overwatching the city. That is Central City. It's a place that gets attacked by poachers as well as Eggman from time to time. But you should know that it's safer out here in the woods. Named Sonic. Sonic the Hedgehog. The Blue Hedgehog said, happily. Izuku stared at the Blue Hedgehog for a moment before taking in everything that happened in his early morning, and promptly fainted on the ground. Chapter 2. Chapter Summary. Izuku manages to wake up from his passing out session. He also learns to not use his ears as weapons, all before finding out that Sonic willingly allows Eggman to escape. A new threat shows itself for a brief moment, albeit to nobody in particular. Izuku woke up a few minutes later as he shook his head. He was feeling something underneath his head as he felt something very soft, turning his head slowly, expecting to be a female giving him the famed lap pillow that his perverted classmates at Aldera had spoken in secret about, only to find that he'd been sleeping on a small couch that had just been able to keep his small frame on it because of how short he was. He had no idea as to why he thought someone was giving him a lap pillow, but he didn't care at this point in time. Feeling around his head, he found his bunny ears still on top of his head as he let out a sigh. Everyone always had compared his meek personality to that of a bunny, and now that he felt the trademark ears on his head, he pouted. Well, at least my C classmates were right about my P personality. C, can I at least use my ears as a weapon though? Izuku muttered to himself. But if I were to use them as a W weapon, wouldn't T that be as assault? Izuku muttered. I know that I'm not that well. Izuku continued to mutter to himself. As the young bunny had been muttering to himself, he was completely unaware of the fact that someone was overhearing his little mutter session. They looked around the corner and smirked to themselves before walking out from behind the wall they were standing behind. They sat next to the bunny as he kept muttering to himself, pulling a small notebook out of his backpack, and from what the newcomer could see, it was burned and destroyed by water damage. They cringed as they watched the bunny prepare to write in the ruined notebook before he sighed and turned to look around the place only for green eyes met blue as they finally took notice of the other. Sorry. I didn't mean to disturb you, Izuku said as he bowed while sitting. Don't worry about it, little guy. Now can you inform me as to what you're here for? Sonic wouldn't stop talking about you, especially about how comically large your ears were. The chipmunk questioned. And my name is Izuku. Midoriya is Izuku. Izuku said, as the chipmunk nodded. Well, Izuku, welcome to the resistance base within the Central City National Forest. I'm Sally Acorn, princess of the Acorn bloodline within the Acorn Kingdom. Sally said, rubbing Izuku's furry head. And nice to meet you, Mrs. Acorn. Izuku said, as Sally chuckled. Don't worry about using my last name. I threw that away as soon as I became the leader of the freedom fighters, Sally said, as Izuku looked concerned. Why? Izuku asked, as Sally chuckled even more. I joined them because Dr. Eggman wouldn't stop attacking everyone in Mobius. I plan on reclaiming my title as the princess as soon as Eggman is either in prison or killed. I don't really care about what happens to him, Sally said, as Izuku nodded. As Sally continued to tell Izuku about his job as a new member of the Freedom Fighters, Izuku was looking confused as to why he was being chosen to be a part of her Freedom Fighters. She then asked him later on about if he wanted to really see if he could weaponize his ears as well as other body parts. Izuku blushed when she finished that sentence earlier, but he nodded the same at her as she showed him around the Freedom Fighter base. As he looked at all the people fighting for the freedom of all Mobians, as well as the takedown of Dr. Eggman, he took in a deep breath as she brought him to the fighting arena, as she called it. She pulled over a large dummy of Dr. Eggman as she gave him the go-ahead to use his ears against it. He tensed his ears for a moment as he felt them harden slightly in preparation as he swung his head around and slammed them into the dummy of Dr. Eggman, only for him to hold his ears in his hands as he let out a small yelp of pain. Well, it appears as though you can't use the ears as a weapon. I don't know why they are so large, though, Sally said, writing down her observations in a small notebook. Well, I've never used a limb like my ears like this before. So I wouldn't know how to utilize them properly. Izuku replied as Sally stared at him. Did you ever learn how to fight from someone? She questioned as Izuku shook his head. I don't belong in this world. All I know is the fact that I appeared here, Izuku said, as Sally nodded. Where did you come from then? If you don't mind me asking? Sally asked, as Izuku spoke up. I came from a world where superpowers like Sonic's SP speed were commonplace. I wasn't born with a superpower of my own, Izuku said, looking away sadly. Not everyone was made for being a hero. But what are your other skills? Sally questioned. I don't know, Izuku said, as he rubbed the back of his head. All right, what are your hobbies? She asked, as Izuku smiled sadly. I wrote down about the Q quirks of my peers. The same for H, heroes, and some V villains, Izuku said, as Sally immediately took notice of how less he stuttered on that subject. How would you take notes on them? She asked, as she was hoping he'd say a notebook. I would write down their quirks down in my hero analysis notebook. I would try and write down all in my theories about their Q quirks or see which fighting style works best for them. But everyone just told me that I was more of a stalker. Why with my notes? Izuku said, looking away from Sally. I think I know what kind of personnel you can be for the freedom fighters, Sally said, smirking. What? Izuku asked, as Sally smirked even more. You can be someone who observes the fighting styles of our opponents. If you can figure out how they fight, then your notes on how they fight can be a boon for our cause to stop Eggman once and for all, Sally said, as she pulled Izuku over to some computers. Equals 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 equals. For the remainder of the evening, Izuku was shown multiple videos about Sonic and his friends fighting the Robotnik robots. Not to mention the fact that Izuku was shown how the robots specifically fought, and Izuku wrote everything down in a new notebook that was given to him by Sally. She knew that he was sad when he saw his previous notebook and gave him a new one so that he could transfer all his notes from the old one into the new one. But also, another one for specifically writing about the enemies they come across, so that the next time they come across such a foe that they can take them down with a strategy. For the rest of the night, Izuku was in the computer room as he looked at the multiple videos of Sonic and his friends fighting Robotnik and his badniks. He was very surprised with how simple they fought, as though they were given very predictable fighting styles as if they weren't made to take on Sonic and his friends. He also noticed how each and every time that Sonic and Co. had taken down a specific badnik, a small bird creature would fly outside of it. And as he looked through multiple more videos, he found that they were the same for different species of robots that Robotnik had sent out to Sonic and his crew to take on. But the fights he had been shown about Robotnik and Sonic specifically, he was greatly underwhelmed by how the fights take place and end. To be honest, he doesn't know why Sonic doesn't even catch the man if he has the speed to catch up to the man in his speeder vehicle without any effort. From his speed feats alone, Izuku knew that Sonic could easily end the fight between him and Eggman quite easily, but for some reason he holds back enough to allow Eggman to get a few good hits, and that could become fatal if he gets hit harder than what Eggman throws at him. Eventually, Sonic will become so arrogant in battle that he'd get taken advantage of during a moment of his guard being lowered, and Eggman could quite easily kill him without even knowing it. Is the freedom fighters incompetent? I am being shown multiple videos of Sonic's fight with Eggman at the end of each zone, and each time he lets Eggman go for some reason. What is going on? Izuku muttered to himself. What are you doing in here still? I thought you were in bed. A familiar voice called out behind him. Huh? Izuku asked, turning around to see Sally behind him. Sally? Izuku asked, as Sally herself looked into his eyes. What is it? You should be going to bed to get some sleep, Sally said, as Izuku cleared his throat. Why does Sonic let Eggman get away multiple times? Izuku asked. What are you talking about? Sally questioned. Well, looking at the F footage alone. Sonic is allowing Eggman to escape. Izuku informed as Sally looked at multiple zones. Are you sure that Sonic is allowing him to get away? Sally questioned. Why yeah. Sonic has shown feats of speed that should allow him to catch and bring Eggman to justice multiple times. How fast can Sonic go exactly? Izuku asked, as Sally looked at him and the footage. He can go faster than the speed of sound as well as light itself. From one of our adventures, he has managed to run so fast he traveled through time. Sally said, as Izuku gulped. Well, if he can move that fast, why is he allowing Eggman to escape each time? Izuku asked. You pulled the words out of my mouth. Get some sleep, kid. We will need your brain later on. I need to have a word or two with Sonic, Sally said, her little tuft of hair covering her eyes. Walking around the Freedom Fighters base of operations, Izuku looked around for a door with his name on it. But that proved to be something very difficult, as he had no idea where the small rooms where the Freedom Fighters had their spare bedrooms. Shaking his head, he had walked towards a small hole on the ground that had a small sign hanging just above the small hole with his name on it. They were really taking his bunny name to heart, huh? Moving into the small underground hut, he looked around the area and found that it was actually very comfortable looking on its own. He found the bed nearby as he laid down on it as he thought about his night, and for the moment, he wouldn't mind Sonic getting in trouble with Sally for his actions of not taking Eggman in when he has the chance. If he really wanted to make sure that Eggman didn't get away with whatever he did to the entirety of Mobius, he really should try and take him in. Off in the distance, a weird black smoky ghost/mist had shown itself around the small base of operations of the Freedom Fighters. It smiled evilly as it took in the view of his target to take over. Licking his lips, he let out a raspy laugh that was followed by him slowly disappearing into the sky, his red eyes glowing in the dark sunrise of the morning. Chapter 3. Whilst Izuku was hiding in his little den, Sonic had arrived after fending off an attack from Eggman. He was looking particularly happy as he walked through the base of operations for the Freedom Fighters. The place was a small, safe haven for him to relax for a bit. What he had not been prepared for was a very irate Sally rushing towards him with murder on her mind as she stopped in front of him before taking in a deep breath. She glared at him for a moment as Sonic attempted to read what kind of situation he was entering and thought she was angry for not getting her something to eat for her cravings. As he opened his mouth to speak, Sally had just thrown a small notebook into his face, causing him to grab it from midair, giving her an expression of pure calm and collectiveness. Any reason why my girlfriend is wanting to throw something at me unprovoked? Sonic questioned. Unprovoked? Do you have any idea as to what I had just downed out this morning? Sally screamed at him, gaining attention. What is it? I don't know what you're talking about unless you tell me. Sonic retorted. The fact that you nearly let Eggman escape from every encounter the two of you have. That's what. Sally screamed at him. What are you talking about? I'm never letting him go, Sonic said, as he glared at Sally. Read those notes then, Sonic. Those are from that new rabbit that joined our group. I asked him what his skills were, and was told by him specifically that he was very keen on observation. And what do you know? Every time you fight Eggman, there are exact moments in time where you can take him down once and for all, Sally said, as Sonic looked down at the notebook. He opened it slowly, thinking that something was going to leap out and attack him. And as he saw the language written, he saw that the writing could be improved upon from how whoever wrote this rambled on in the notes itself, but they were very good if they were able to keep him in his line of sight through electronics. But by the time it reached the moments at each zone where he fights Eggman, he paid extra attention to those fights as it portrayed him as merely having fun in the fight instead of being completely serious. Even he had to admit that whilst these notes aren't wrong about him having fun in his fights with Eggman, they were very eye-opening for him as they mentioned multiple times he could have attacked when he instead dodged. Scratching the back of his head, he merely closed the notebook, having seen everything he needed to, and gave the notebook back to Sally, who just glared at him even harder. What do you want me to say? Can't I at least have fun messing with Eggman whenever we meet? Sonic asked as Sally looked like she was about to burst a blood vessel. Your job is to make sure that Eggman can't attack us anymore. And what are you doing currently? Sally asked, angrily. I'm relaxing. You are aware that those robots of his aren't very featherlight in their general makeup. They are metal that I am slamming my body into each and every time I fight Eggman himself, as well as when he uses his giant mechas. Sonic said, as he looked around. What are your plans for when you meet Eggman next? Are you going to let him get away again? Or are you finally going to nab him before taking him to prison? Sally questioned. Geez, you make it sound as though I'm the bad guy for not being able to catch him, Sonic said, cleaning out one of his ears. That's because it should be extremely easy for you to grab him. You are the fastest thing alive. You could easily enter his base without him knowing about it, and just pull him out with him being none the wiser. Sally yelled. Who was the person who wrote this? Sonic asked, pointing to the notebook. What? Are you going to get angry with whoever wrote it? Sally questioned, her anger slowly ebbing away. No, I'm going to congratulate them for managing to figure out many ways for me to end a fight between me and Eggman. I may be the fastest thing alive, Sally, but that doesn't mean that I'm the smartest, Sonic said as he walked away. Whilst Sonic walked away, the ghost form hiding in a nearby tree flew towards Sonic at blinding speeds. And before the hedgehog could even react to what was happening, the ghostly form had taken control of his body, continuing his walk away from the area to begin his own nefarious plans for this world of Mobius. Izuku was sleeping for a few hours. He was having a dream where he wasn't in the world of anthropomorphic animals who could move faster than the speed of light and sound, who had two tails to fly, had strong knuckles that allowed them to both climb and quills that allowed small forms of flight. Don't even get him started on how loud Sally could be when she was furious about whatever happened outside the little den he'd been given for himself. And as the hours continued further, Izuku came out of the den at around midnight as he stretched his body before looking around the place. Everything was covered to the brim with blood and guts everywhere. Something fell on top of his head as he looked around and felt his furred head. Pulling his hand back, he found that the comically large glove on his hand was covered in blood as he looked around the area. Once he gained the thought process to look up, he found multiple bodies lying across the trees, and he found that Sally wasn't amongst them at all. Shaking his head in slight fear as to what could have done this, he initially thought of Eggman, but then another thought had come up to him all on its own. What if Sonic got angry at Sally and decided to really snap against her? Shaking his head, he knew that Sonic wouldn't kill one of his own like this, much less in such a very gruesome and harsh way. He moved through the trees and forestry as he looked at each and every dead corpse on the ground. He eventually came across what some of the others within the Freedom Fighters, on his first day by the way, called flickies. They were small bird-like creatures that the Freedom Fighters stated that they'd protect with their very lives. And those little creatures were lying on the ground dead as well. He felt tears falling from his eyes as he looked at each and every dead body on the ground before moving to head back into his den, his face filled with complete fear as he sat down on the ground. For the next few minutes, Izuku sat there feeling all the death and fear that had filled the area above ground. He felt a small shiver down his spine as he thought something was watching his home from afar before leaving the area as a whole as if to report something. It was here that Izuku felt as though he'd need to leave his home and make sure that he makes a new base of operations to protect himself from whatever threat had just found him. Grabbing a backpack, he filed it with clothing and food plus water. Once that was done, he put on some shoes and climbed out of his little hut and rushed off into the brush. It was a good thing that he did, because as soon as he disappeared from the den, something fell from the sky and destroyed it entirely. He held his breath as he looked at Sonic as he held a very different vibe from when he first met the hedgehog. This version of Sonic was very clearly not the Sonic that he'd met earlier that morning, and he could easily tell this from how this Sonic had very red, crimson-colored eyes and yellow teeth. Sonic had blue-green eyes and white teeth. and he definitely didn't have sharp teeth except for his canines. It looks like he got away. Damn, I should have just attacked when I had the chance earlier. Lord X will not be happy. A distorted voice of Sonic said, albeit a little raspy. No matter, I will find him later. I have a few more souls to collect before I can even reach Mountain Peak, he said, before rushing away. Once the evil Sonic had left the area, Izuku came out of his hiding spot as he rushed off into the dark night of the forest. As he ran, he couldn't help but think that he was extremely lucky as to how he had that feeling of being watched before his home was crushed into nothing. Call it a danger sense from his new body, but Izuku liked to make it feel as though it was his experience from knowing that he was being followed back in his original world. Shaking his head once again, he needed to keep his eyes on the only thing he should be knowledgeable about: getting away with his life and survive long enough for Sally and the other freedom fighters, if they are still alive. He continued to rush through the forest as he stepped on small twigs before he fell into a small pit. He noticed that it wasn't just any kind of pit. It had spikes at the bottom as Izuku just flailed around thinking that he was about to die for the second time. But he felt as though he stopped falling at some point, and as soon as he opened his eyes, he found that he was just barely floating above the spikes. Letting out a small sigh of relief, he tried to fly higher than he was, and he felt himself float higher. Once he got up to high ground, he felt something fall on top of his head and felt that his ears had suddenly grown in size, acting as if they were propellers. I guess I found a way to use my giant ears, Izuku muttered before taking off. I need to find everyone, but I don't know about what this world has or what zones there are. I just hope that I find a place that looks slightly familiar, Izuku said to himself. Moving forwards through the forest, Izuku came across a giant golden ring as it was just sitting there. He walked up to it as he saw that there was a giant island in the sky on the other side of it. So not thinking straight, he stepped foot inside of the golden ring as he was suddenly taken inside of it. No! A voice from the forest called out, revealing the Sonic lookalike who was angrily looking where the golden ring had once been. Damn it! I was so close to ambushing him. Lord X will not be happy that I let another of the freedom fighters escape, he muttered. Xenophanes! A very loud voice called out. Shit, the Sonic lookalike said, before rushing towards a nearby red giant ring. Equals 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 equals. Izuku appeared on an island that was high in the sky. He looked over the edge of it and saw that he was thousands of feet in the air and gulped nervously as he walked through the destroyed island of the sky. He saw the place was still on fire as he walked through it, and as he cautiously walked through the flaming forestry, he found that there was something nearby on the ground and walked over to it. Picking up the item from the ground, he found that it was a small arm blaster rifle, and he thought to himself of something he'd heard back when he was at the Freedom Fighter campsite. This was Tails' weapon. How did it get lost here? Izuku muttered as he put it on his arm. Well, I guess I can just return it to him once I get away from this place. Whoever destroyed it must not be nearby right now. But if they could find me in my little den, they could most definitely find me here. Izuku muttered again before rushing away. So this is the bunny you lost track of. He appears to be disappointing to me. No matter, I will take care of it. Xenophanes, just head back to the underworld. I will take care of that little rabbit, the voice said, as Xenophanes gave a gruff grunt. As Izuku rushed through the flaming island, he found himself coming close to an area where he could see a giant emerald on a pyramid structure. He ran over to it as he saw how large it was compared to him. He felt something calling to him to place a hand over it and softly placed a palm on it. As soon as he felt how coarse and soft it was at the same time, a pulse of power entered through his entire body as he noticed that he was being watched by something in the trees. Turning around to see who was glaring at him as he stood in front of the emerald, a red echidna had walked over to him with a very angered expression on his face. What in the hell are you doing to the Master Emerald? The red echidna called out. I feel as though it talked to me, Izuku said, as the red echidna just stared at him for a moment. Well, that's good. Now you need to get away from here, the echidna said, as Izuku tilted his head. Why? Do you know what's going on? Izuku asked, as the echidna just shook his head. No, all I know is that Sonic is being possessed by something that we don't know. Head to this base on Mountain Peak. I will head there after collecting the Master Emerald and placing its shards in a small bag, the echidna said, as Izuku prepared to leave. Wait, what's your name? Izuku asked, as the echidna threw a small ring that became a large one. The name is Knuckles. Knuckles the echidna. Now leave, he said, as he shoved Izuku through the portal. Do you really think that Mountain Peak will remain out of my range for long? Knuckles? A voice called out behind the echidna. Me, Tails, and Eggman have defeated you before X. You will not be taking control of the Master Emerald. Knuckles called out, entering a combat stance. So be it. But just know, I will not be allowing you to escape this time, X said, as he rushed at Knuckles. Chapter 4. Chapter Summary. Izuku arrives outside of Mountain Peak. He saves someone who's about to be killed by Lord X. Appearing on the other side of the Golden Ring, Izuku landed on the ground with a grunt. He looked at his new surroundings. As he got adjusted to the level of near brightness, the place seemed to be enthralled with. Looking at the surrounding area, he found that there was a small, abandoned town not too far away and made his way over there, knowing that if he went that way someone might be there to give him directions. Running down the path, Izuku didn't want to let Knuckles' decision to hold of that creature, X if he heard correctly, off until he arrived at Mountain Peak's base of operations. He made it there within a couple of hours as he walked through the empty streets of the town. It looked entirely abandoned before he decided to take refuge inside of one of the buildings in order to get some sleep. If he could sleep some before heading out in the morning, he might have a chance of making it to this mountain peak by evening the next day. Sitting down on a couch, he looked at the pictures that belonged to one of the families that lived in this specific house. It was a tall rabbit with large ears similar to his own, but there were two females in the picture that he could surmise. The tall one was definitely the mother, based on the height difference between the two, especially the loving looks the mother was currently giving the child in the picture. From what he could see of the child, however, she looked like a complete clone of the mother except for the short stature, as well as clear indication that she was only around 10 years of age. I miss you, Mom. I just hope that I can return back home and think none of this ever happened, Izuku muttered to himself. Falling asleep on the couch for the evening, Izuku had nightmares of being caught by the Sonic Faker. Waking up in the middle of the night due to a nightmare, Izuku went to get something to drink from his backpack before he felt a presence looking down on him from above. Looking up cautiously, he found a woman just lying on the ceiling with blood falling from their mouth and body as a very large X was placed over her chest, her naked form for him to see. Izuku felt like he was going to throw up, and as he moved towards the bathroom, he heard the sound of screaming coming from down the street. Climbing out the window with his backpack on his back, he rushed to where the sound had come from. Down on the street, he found an anthropomorphic bat sitting on her ass as she stared at the threat in front of her. The Sonic Faker had arrived there and was thinking about killing her. And without even thinking about what could happen to himself, Izuku thrusted himself at the monster as he jumped into the air and flapped his ears above the Sonic Faker. Dropping down on him from above, he heard the words of the fake Sonic as he spoke to the woman who was extremely injured. With your death, I will be capable of entering Mountain Peak, and soon enough I will manage to kill every single person in Mobius. Once that happens, there will be nothing that can stop me. Ahahahahaha, the Sonic Faker said, his laugh very disturbing. Not if I have anything to say about it, Izuku screamed out, causing the Sonic Faker to turn immediately to him in shock. What? He called out before a pair of green and pink ears slammed into his gut, sending him flying into the distance. 4. Izuku called out, before shaking his head. We should probably get out of here before he comes back, Izuku said, picking the Batgirl up. Just head down this pathway, it leads straight to Mountain Peak, she said, as Izuku followed the path. Equals 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 equals. Running down the path, The two finally arrived in the outskirts of Mountain Peak, and once crossing over the border, they managed to finally escape the monster that used to be Sonic the Hedgehog. The Batgirl rushed off into the distance without thanking him for saving her life, and Izuku made sure to slowly move through the night as he thought about the nightmare he'd gotten before he heard the girl scream. He continued to stew on his thoughts before he heard the sound of feet rushing towards him and his position, and when he looked up, he found Sally staring at him in wonder. "Why, you survived? How did he not find you?" Sally asked. "I don't know, Sally, but all I know was that when I woke up everything was covered in blood and guts. Not to mention that I had no idea where you all were. So I just went in a singular direction hoping to find you guys," Izuku said, as Sally let out a breath of fresh air. "Yeah, you did a good job actually sleeping for once. Because as soon as you fell asleep, I had a talk with Sonic. It appeared as though he was impressed with your work, but as soon as he left our conversation, he came back with red eyes and yellowed sharp teeth. His claws were sharper than they usually were, but we dealt with this kind of situation before. All we need to do is make sure that we can bring the Master Emerald here and finish him off once and for all. He escaped us the last time," Sally said, muttering the last part. "Who is this demonic being?" Izuku asked as Amy walked up. "Hey, new kid. Well, to answer your question about who that faker was, his name is Lord X. He came from the void of our universe, and he has only one goal in mind: to kill everyone on Mobius. We were capable of expelling him from Sonic's body the first time, but this time is different. He'd taken complete control of Sonic, from how Sonic isn't fighting back against him. It's as though he wants to have vengeance on everyone in Mobius," Amy said, as Izuku thought about it. "I think I'm at fault for this," Izuku said, as Amy looked to him. Over the next few minutes, Izuku explains what his reasons for being the cause of Sonic actually wanting to kill everyone. And for them to hear this, it's not very far-fetched, as Izuku was the first and only person to ever tell him that if he really wanted to stop Eggman himself, he could have done it ages ago. Hell, Sonic had the power to kill Eggman in his sleep without him even being none the wiser. The only reason he apparently kept Eggman around was because he felt as though the man could redeem himself in some kind of way. And to hear that you are essentially causing the deaths of everyone around yourself from an outsider? Well, why not just allow the being who took control of you last time around keep control and let your inner hatred of everything out? As everyone listened in on Izuku's description of how Sonic would probably react to him being the reason he was possessed, Tails was the one to be on his side. "I don't know why you are beating yourself up like this. The only time Sonic was even capable of fighting back against Lord X was because me, Knuckles, and Robotnik were leaving for this place the first time. So the fact that he'd willingly allow himself to be possessed is not a very smart thing that Sonic would do. If anything, he would fight many times harder to prevent such a mind as your own from being taken by him," Tails exclaimed. Really? And nobody but Sally's ever said that about me before," Izuku said, as Amy and Sally with Tails looked at him in alarm. "Well, then that means that you are joining our misfit group," Tails said happily. They were about to continue their little conversation when two giant golden rings appeared on Mountain Peak. And jumping though the two of them were Knuckles and Dr. Eggman, as the doctor was looking worse for wear. He had been holding onto his stomach as he thought about what to do. The last time he'd fought Lord X was when everyone around the entirety of Mobius was killed off instantly. They could only hold him off before leaving the area to come back later and trap him with the Master Emerald. He'd be expecting them to do the same thing again this time. Can someone tell me how the bloody hell Sonic got possessed by Lord X again? Eggman screamed out like a petulant child. Chapter 5. Chapter Summary. Robotnik has words with everyone about Lord X. Izuku learns about how rude Eggman can be. Lord X finds Izuku not on Mountain Peak. Can someone tell me how the bloody hell Sonic got possessed by Lord X again? Eggman called out angrily. Eggman, the last thing we need right in now is everyone throwing a fit, Izuku said, as Eggman stared at him. I've never seen a green rabbit mobby in a day in my life. What are you doing here? Clearly you do not belong here. Eggman growled. I came here through events I am not even aware of. But all I know is that I need to assist with this threat all I can. Izuku said, as Eggman looked at him closer. You don't have one of those heroic complexes, do you? I swear every one of you Mobians wish to become a hero. Eggman grumbled as he walked away. How did you manage to get Eggman of all people to just leave a conversation like that? If we knew how to do that, we'd win our battles all the time. Sally questioned as Izuku looked a bit embarrassed. Well, all I really did was just tell him the truth. That's all. Izuku replied as Sally sighed. Over the next few days, the entirety of the Freedom Fighters came up with strategies for taking on Lord X. After learning about the man and his past with Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, and Eggman, Izuku learned that Lord X had fought Knuckles, Tails, and Eggman before and had somehow lost with all his powers that he held over Sonic within the Hedgehog's body, of course, which caused Izuku to literally look at them all with exasperation. How was Sonic clearly capable of taking on Eggman all by himself, but at the same time incapable of taking him down all on his lonesome, much less with the assistance of Tails, Knuckles, and the Freedom Fighters as a whole? Getting his head out of that rabbit hole, no pun intended, of muttering spells, Izuku helped out with plans on how to get the Mobian Devil out for them to use their plan. Based on what Tails and Knuckles spoke about the Master Emerald, it was perfectly capable of expelling the demonic presence of Lord X, a being from the vast void of the universe who had lived far longer than the god of destruction Chaos himself. But the plan all amounted to someone having to lure Lord X out of hiding in order to initiate a fight between one of their own and him. But that was the easy part, keeping him completely taken off guard by the fight between himself and the person in the battle with him was the very, very hard part. Considering the fact that he's probably not going to go easy on those he comes across and will just go for the kill, and practically nobody is safe if they go out there. Although since Izuku was fairly new to the place, Izuku thought that he'd be the perfect bait for Lord X to come out and play some games before coming in to try and land a final attack on him in order to kill him. Izuku was all for that kind of plan and went to inform Sally, Tails, Knuckles, and Eggman about his idea for catching Lord X unawares and saving Sonic from the demon himself. Walking around Mountain Peak, Izuku found himself arriving at Eggman's little building, hearing the sounds of machinery inside. Knocking on the door, he waited for the Mad Doctor to come out. Once he did, he looked around before looking down to see Izuku's shy form shuffling on his feet. What do you want, plebeian? Eggman asked, looking exhausted. I think I have a plan for how we catch Lord X unawares, Izuku said, as Eggman leaned on his door. Well, I'm waiting to hear this kind of plan, Eggman said, as Izuku looked away. Well, it involves me, but I'd rather wait until I've gathered everyone to inform them about my plan, Izuku said, as Eggman just stared. Well, not like I have anything to do aside from building robots that can lock onto Lord X's presence within the world of Mobius. Meet us at the main hall, Eggman said, as he walked back inside his house before coming back outside. It's down the road and to the left. It's a really large building for comically short anthropomorphic creatures, Eggman supplied as Izuku hurried down the road. Walking through the halls of the main hall, Izuku saw each and every famous creature of Mobius that had managed to change history as a whole on the planet. He entered the meeting room within the comically large building and saw the leaders of each part of Mobius sitting in their chairs as Eggman grumbled to himself. Looking around at the table, he found multiple survivors who were leaders in their own right in the Batmobian he had rescued earlier that day, a black and red version of Sonic that Izuku trembled when under his gaze. A silver-looking hedgehog who looked similar to the black and red one who just stared at him in a questioning manner before settling into his seat. Once Izuku looked at the others, a pink-colored hedgehog as well as a small rabbit Mobian was present as well, with her a large robot that looked eerily similar to Eggman's robots. To finish the table off was Sally and her second-in-command sitting at the front of the table looking at him with confusion, as they had no clue that he was the one to come up with this kind of plan. So what is the meaning of this meeting, Eggman? I know that you couldn't have come up with a plan for Lord X that fast since you just arrived not even a few hours ago, Sally questioned as the man in question himself just scoffed. I didn't come up with a plan. The green rabbit over there had made up one on the spot earlier. Go on, you little brat, Tell them and me about your plan, Eggman said, as he glared at Izuku through his goggles. I plan on being the bait for this kind of plan. Izuku started as Sally just looked downright concerned. Why are you thinking that you should be the bait for this kind of plan? What is it? Sally questioned, looking vastly cautious at Izuku. Lord X hasn't really met me personally. And not to mention he's never met me before I arrived here. So who better to distract him from your plan of using the Master Emerald to expel him from Sonic's body than myself? Someone who doesn't even belong in this world. Izuku said, as everyone stared at him. How fast are you? Tails questioned cautiously. I was able to catch him by surprise earlier this week, saving her. Izuku said, pointing at the bat. What? Lord X had managed to catch up to me whilst I was flying. The Mobian replied with a shrug of her shoulders. Rouge, you were supposed to be on a supply run. How did you manage to nearly get killed? The Black Hedgehog questioned exasperatedly. I didn't notice he was their shadow. I never knew until he had sliced a little bit into my wing with his massive claws. I was lucky the greenie over there was able to save me in time. Otherwise, we'd be having a very blue and red problem on your hands, Rouge said, as Izuku finally found her name. Well, aside from that, I think we should come up with someone who is on par with Sonic in terms of overall speed when it comes to being bait, Sally said, as Shadow glared at her. I don't know how you think I'm fast enough to be on par with Lord X, but if you hadn't remembered Sally, he can fucking fly. Shadow retorted with anger. Has Sonic ever flown in his time without the Chaos Emeralds? Sally questioned. Only with them, Sally, and he was in his super form when that happened, Tails said, with Knuckles nodding. For the remainder of the day, the group of leaders conversed with one another about who should be the bait for Lord X. But as they couldn't come up with anyone else, Izuku found himself a little smug as they knew that nobody else would last very long against Lord X in a fight, especially since he could fly. But if he were to meet Izuku in the flesh instead of using one of his mini drones, they might have a chance to catch him unawares. But as soon as everyone turned to look at him, they noticed a small outline of where he saw still there, but his physical body was gone from the area, and rushing out to find him, they couldn't find him. Eggman had immediately set off to check his robots for the rabbit's signature within their world. It would take a few minutes, but they would need all the time in the world now if Izuku was actually going to enact his plans now. Walking outside of the mountain peak ruins, Izuku walked as far as he could in order to have Lord X sense his presence within the entire world of Mobius. He had actually made it to what the others called Green Zone by the Freedom Fighters when he found a drone standing across from him with a confused expression. They immediately walked towards him with a very malicious smile on their face as their hands rose into the air as Izuku rose a hand into the air, as well causing the drone to stop their plans. Staring at him now with confusion, Izuku took this chance to call out to Lord X in order to talk, but he wanted to state a little quote from his favorite comic character that he'd seen back in his world through a movie called Doctor Strange. What are you doing? Don't you care about your life? The drone questioned. Lord X, I've come here to bargain. Izuku spoke as he glared into the drone's eyes. What makes you think that you can bring him out through a bargain? The drone questioned again. I have information about the plans of those on Mountain Peak, as well as who are still alive that he hasn't caught, Izuku said, as he looked determined. Are you sure that you want to say your bargain? I can always kill you before you tell me and probe your mind for that information, the drone said, raising a clawed hand. I can also give him information about a world chock filled with superpowers that he would be drooling to collect as his slaves, Izuku said, determinedly. A world of superpowers, you say? What if I think you're bluffing? The drone asked. If I die without giving the information about that world, then that information is gone forever, Izuku said, as the drone laughed maniacally. Well played. I will inform Lord X about your bargain. Play your cards right, and you might become the new host for the master, the drone said, before disappearing into black smoke. Izuku stood there for a while before he felt his heart continue to beat very fast, like he was terribly fearful for his life at this moment. He knew that he was jumping the gun for this plan, but he wanted to buy everyone enough time to set up, and what better way of doing that than selling his old world out? Sure, his mother lived in that world, But as of late, she had been splitting apart from him emotionally for the last 10 years of his life, and he'd found some letters from his father informing her about how she could move into the United States to live with him. And she had accepted his offer to go there. He read the letter she was about to send back, and it showed that she was very sad about her life with him in her life and wanted to start over in America. Because of that, Izuku had willingly torn his relationship with his mother that night as he stopped talking to her, as well as hanging out with her over the last few years enough that she had been about to leave the night before he met All Might. He was brought out of his muttering when he heard heavy breathing behind himself. Turning his head around, he came face to face with Sonic's form as the demon inside was looking at him with an exasperated expression on his face before smiling. "So, it appears that your muttering session is complete. What was this bargain you had in store for me?" Lord X questioned, his expression now very intrigued. "Like I said, Lord X, I've come here to bargain with you. And I have information about a world that you could take over and simultaneously lord yourself over as the true god of that world," Izuku said, as Lord X now looked very attentive. "What does that world have that this one doesn't have?" Lord X questioned. "Everyone in that world, minus a 20% minority, has a superpower of their own, and most of them are completely corrupted, and if you show them who you really are, they will follow you without fail," Izuku said, as Lord X looked like he was really about to bite. "And if you are wrong?" he asked. "Just look through my memories. You can manifest yourself in my universe itself and take over the human you desire to be the most on that planet where I lived. They all have superpowers, and they are more than powerful enough to sate your lust for power," Izuku said, as Lord X was now rubbing his hands together. "You are willing to give up your universe for my eternal pleasure? Surely there is something you want in return?" Lord X questioned. "There is, in exchange for my world. Could you please leave Mobius and its inhabitants alone for the rest of their lives in this universe?" Izuku asked, his eyes conveying that he wasn't lying. Lord X stood against the tree as he saw the others within the world of Mobius mobilizing in order to take him down. He chuckled to himself as he realized the plan Izuku was making. It was a good bargain for him in the end. All he'd need to do is allow himself to be expelled from the hedgehog's body, and he could literally take control of the world the rabbit told him he was from originally. Something had to happen to him to want to have nothing to wish for that world and protect this one he came to. A world that has yet to show him the pros and cons of living here forever. He ultimately decided to ask a question that was on his mind since Izuku bargained with him. "Did this world of yours do something to you that deserved you to not protect them? Surely there are people there that you'd wish to protect?" Lord X questioned, Sonic's voice echoing through. "Don't answer him. He will literally take over your body. That world I came from, it didn't like the fact I wasn't born with a power. It is entirely corrupted with those who value the power of a quirk/superpower to become something that they dream of. All I ever wanted was to just become a hero, and everyone either mocked me or berated me for my dreams. And my idol even told me it was impossible," Izuku said, as tears now flowed from his eyes. "Did they ever hurt you physically?" he questioned, his tone oddly soft. "Every day of my life. Every day I contemplated whether or not I should end my own life, was even encouraged to end it by who I thought was my friend. Do why you want to know his exact words?" Izuku questioned the demonic being. "I guess I should humor you for your plan to come to fruition," Lord X said, as Izuku stared at him shocked for a moment. "Es should be known to that you'd catch on. He told me that if I wanted to be a hero so badly, then there might be another way I could become one. Just pray that I will be born with a Quirk in my next life and take a swan dive of the roof of the building. He told me to kill him myself, and I am not okay with that line of thinking," Izuku said, as he continued to cry, rubbing his eyes. Lord X has killed a great many Mobians and many universes of Mobius where he'd been capable of killing Sonic and his friends. Though there was one constant in each universe he'd entered. Nobody was ever rude to anyone except for those they had explicit reason to be rude to. But to hear that Izuku was bullied and suicide-baited for no reason aside from his seemingly inability to have a superpower of his own, It caused the eldritch deity to feel something he'd never felt in eons, something that hadn't been felt since he was brought into being by his baby sister, Empress C. He could remember how she was treated by the other gods of Mobius, especially that of those who were very afraid of her power to create demonic beings such as himself to be an older sibling. And he took the form of Sonic because he had all the qualities of an older sibling from how he viewed the many realities where he became the older brother figure to Tails and decided to become similar to him there, only for the gods around him to banish him into the void of the known universe and kill his baby sister whilst he couldn't do anything to come back, and for a moment, he felt a little sad for Izuku, an emotion he'd never felt in eons as he'd though before, but shaking his head with Sonic's physical form, he looked into Izuku's clearly broken eyes and started at his broken soul inside. All he could see from Izuku's soul was a literal child around the age of 4, green eyes, hair with black highlights, wearing blue t-shirt and yellow cargo shorts as well as wearing red high-top shoes. And all he did was reach out asking just for a single friend he could have. And as much as Lord X wanted to become that friend for him, his murderous tendencies would scare the poor boy inside the soul of the boy too much. He let out a sigh before holding out a hand as he looked into Izuku's eyes with a softer smile on his face that Izuku reached outwards to hold onto as well. "Bargain accepted," he said, as their palms connected. Chapter 6A Past Preferred Forgotten. Chapter Summary. Lord X is defeated, but he does read everything about Izuku's past life. Sonic and everyone else are shown events from Izuku's past life. Izuku gets a hug from a very sad bat. Lord X and Izuku's palms connect with one another as they shake their hands. Lord X feels the information that the bunny gives flow into his mind as on the outside his form the entire freedom fighters are able to take him down and pin him to the dirt. As they use the Master Emerald to pull Lord X from Sonic's body, the demonic spirit merely smirked as he moved into Izuku's body to absorb enough energy, power, and information from the bunny. As Sonic's body is freed from the demonic spirit, everyone notices that Izuku's form has a weird aura surrounding itself as he stands alone in the field as everyone surrounds him. Sonic glares at the bunny with fury as he prepares to walk over to him in order to punch him in the face for doing something so cruel. But before they could do anything, they watch as the aura suddenly disappears as the bunny suddenly falls to the ground, red electricity moving across his skin before it is absorbed into the body. And as Lord X flew high into the sky before disappearing from the world of Mobius, he smiled to himself as he looked at all the memories that the bunny had of his previous world. That world would get the vengeance the boy desired, but kept hidden from the place for 10 whole years. The fact that he never tried to become a villain in that world was really telling about his heroic personality. He would rather save it instead of letting it fail from the inside, or forcing it to change with him being a villain to fight against. Back on Mobius, however, Sonic and the others sat in their meeting room as they talked about Izuku. The simple fact that he talked to Lord X without their presence was very concerning to them since he never told him when they were going to initiate the plan. He was very impulsive when he stated the plan, as though he expected for himself to be injured in the plan from the very beginning. Now though they stared at the sleeping bunny as he twitched in his seemingly dreamless slumber, Sonic, however, had a few things to say. "All right, do you all want to know what happened in that conversation between Izuku and Lord X?" he questioned as everyone looked to him. "What did they talk about?" Sally asked, as everyone listened in. "Shit, the bunny talked about how his previous world treated him so harshly it was as though he wasn't even human to them. But he willingly told Lord X to take over that world in exchange for keeping our own world safe," Sonic said, as everyone had their jaws dropped. "He sacrificed his home world just to keep our own safe. That takes serious balls," Eggman said, chuckling. "Not that. He willingly sacrificed the world he was born in. He should have made sure that our own world was killed off in order to stay alive," Sonic said, angrily. "So you willingly would have allowed him to destroy our world for the sake of saving trillions of lives of a world in an opposing universe?" Sally questioned with a glare. "And no, but at least think about the repercussions. He's essentially killing trillions of lives from his world by allowing that demon over there," Sonic said, as Eggman chuckled. "You know, for a hedgehog, you are seriously idiotic," Eggman said, as he looked at Sonic. "What makes you think that I'm an idiot? I have defeated you many times with my IQ level. Sonic retorted. Sonic, what Eggman is talking about is the fact that you never really listened to how Izuku talked about his world, did you? Shadow questioned with his eyes closed and arms crossed. What are you talking about? Sonic questioned, fixing a glare to Shadow. His world has hundreds, if not millions of people with quirks, superpowers similar to our own. Only around 20% of the population of his world has no power. Lord X needs to have a host that has power similar to his own in order to take over. Izuku sentenced Lord X to his own demise. Shadow explained as Amy looked to him. Can you say that again for idiot's sake? Amy questioned. In layman's terms, in my world, everyone has a power that can just as easily counter his own demonic powers. Izuku said, with a yawn causing everyone to look at him. Equals 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 equals. Sonic looked at Izuku for a few moments before standing up. Izuku looked at him blearily as he rubbed his eyes. But before he could finish clearing out his eyes to see, he felt something smash into his cheek, sending him from the couch and onto the ground with a yelp. Rubbing his cheek, he looked back up at the person who punched him in the face and saw Sonic glaring down on him with fury as well as anger written on his features, bringing back memories of Bakugo as he glared hatefully at Izuku and smiled evilly. Izuku scuttled back to the wall as his entire form was shaking with fear as he stared at Sonic, and it brought everyone to pull the hedgehog away from the shivering bunny. What did I do in order to be punched? Izuku asked, as Sonic growled. You know what you did? Do you have any idea how many people are going to be killed from your action? Sonic screamed. You don't know how my life was, Sonic. You think that I wasn't treated as a human? I was treated as a lab experiment by everyone I knew and loved. My own mother hated me. Do you really think that I have no faith in the fact that those in my world could change? Izuku asked. That doesn't mean you can sentence them all to death? Some of them could be truly kind and heroic people you hadn't met yet, Sonic said, as Izuku shook his head. I've met people who played nice to me, Sonic, and they just betrayed my trust not even a few hours later. I've never had anyone I could fully trust. I don't even trust everyone in this room as we speak, Izuku said, as he looked into Sonic's eyes. You have no reason to let your world suffer because of how you were treated, Sonic retorted as Izuku stood up. Does anyone have something that can have you feel all the pain of one's memories? Izuku asked, as Tails walked over to a device he'd made. Well, I made one for Robotnik for when we eventually catch him without having this kind of situation happening. But I guess we can have it show your entire memory bank, Tails said, as Izuku nodded. Placing the small device on Izuku's head, the young bunny felt all his memories flowing out from the deep recess of his mind. Every single thing he'd hidden from his life that caused him extensive amounts of pain ranging from emotional to physical to metaphorical. And each memory that was shown was like a gun pointed at each of the people in the room as they watched as Izuku went through each trial of pain and misery in his life. They watched as his mother slowly over the course of 10 whole years lose her love of him and eventually move out of the home and head to America. They watched as Izuku had a very close friend in childhood betray his very trust. They watched as everyone around the boy lose his trust as well as care over the course of 10 whole years in a matter of minutes. Sonic, however, remained calm through it all. He didn't show it, but he felt like a jackass for telling Izuku that he was heartless to give up his planet. The fact that from all the memories the boy had of himself being used as a quirk-based punching bag was enough for him to place a hand over his mouth to cover up the bile coming up as they all watched him patch up his wounds. Tails, however, was feeling very similar thoughts to Izuku as he watched the boy grow up. His friends giving up on him and beating him for something he couldn't control. It caused him to hug his second tail to his chest as he felt tears fall down his face. The women of the groups, however, just stared at the screen with growing concern. The fact that Izuku went through all this pain before coming to their world was not something most people would survive with, much less put up with before going down a very dangerous path of villainy to get reparations for all the pain and suffering that was dealt to them. The fact Izuku had not even thought for a moment of betraying his world for his own benefit never crossed his mind until he came here reborn as a Mobian. Not only that, he sacrificed the only home he'd ever had, just so that their home wouldn't be lost. It showed that he had a modicum of trust in their cause, as well as world for a safe place to live, aside from Eggman's machinations. Izuku, however, just stared at the memories that were in the deepest parts of his mind as tears fell from them. He hated re-watching the memories of his past, from his quirkless diagnosis to his mother telling him he couldn't become a hero without a quirk, all the way to his old friend, who had become his greatest enemy slash bully slash abuser, as he informed him about the best way to become a hero and get a quirk was to just kill himself. That was the worst day of his life if he thought about it. Not to mention the fact that he'd met All Might and the hero himself told him that it was impossible to become a hero in the first place. Taking off the memory machine, everyone noticed one singular memory pop up that seemingly didn't belong to the others. It showed Izuku standing in front of an elderly man with yellow locks of hair and brilliant blue eyes that glowed with power. And then the words came out as Izuku couldn't stop it in time. Do I think that you can become a hero without power? No. No, I should think not. All Might said, as Izuku felt a small part of his brain freeze. It's all right to dream, kid. Just make sure that it's realistic. All Might continued as he opened a metal door and walked through it. Everyone stared at the memory as they knew that this held significance in the boy's life, as they rewound the memory to the point of which Izuku met the man, and they saw the man as a much more muscular man. His form was very imposing as he stood much taller than Eggman himself, but was built from head to toe in muscles. They watched as he saved Izuku's life from a very particular villain made of sludge, and Sonic made a small remark about being capable of making a tornado with enough speed to send the villain flying away. But as the memory went on, they watched as the man recklessly threw a powerful punch at the sludge villain, causing a small shockwave of air to displace the villain and accidentally knocking Izuku out. But mere moments later was shown to be carrying the boy in the air as he had grabbed onto his leg and landing on another building. It was here that they listened in on Izuku's ideals in that world as a young man wishing to become a hero without any kind of training whatsoever. I think that becoming a hero to help people is the greatest thing someone can do. And I inspired me to become a hero like you one day. Everyone doesn't really believe that I can become one. And have been beating that into my head for 10 whole years. But I need to know. Can someone without a Q quirk become a hero like you? Izuku called out, as All Might stared at the boy. Q quirkless. All Might asked, concerned. I know that it's not really been something to have happened in the past, but I think that if I work really hard I can become a hero like you. Izuku said, finally looking at the hero. Everyone watched as the mountain of muscle that was All Might in the memory be shown to be an actual much shorter man with a bony form. His very scrawny form showing that his experience in the field is not to be trusted. In fact, he looked like a mere brush of wind could knock him over if he wasn't very careful. The man let out a bit of blood as he let out a deep huff of air as he tried to get some oxygen into his lungs, causing the memory of Izuku to scream in fear before pulling out a handkerchief out from his pocket. Thank you, young man, cough. Cough. But I need you to promise me to never tell anyone about this form. Nobody can know that their symbol of peace looks like he's minutes away from death's door, no matter how true that statement really is. All Might said, with a cough. Sure thing. How did this happen? Izuku's memory self asked. I got this gnarly scar about 6 years ago to this very day. I fought a villain who could dish out a blow so horrifying that it took most of my stomach, as well as a full lung and half of my respiratory system, just to fix. All Might said, as Izuku showed his knowledge to the man. 6 years ago, it wasn't that fight with T-Toxic C Chainsaw, was it? Izuku asked in the memory. No, that man couldn't even lay a finger on me. He only got a few lucky hits in because of my injury. But no, he wasn't the villain who had done this to me. All Might said, letting his shirt fall down. If Toxic C Chainsaw didn't do that to you, who did? Izuku asked, in the memory. I made sure that the villain who had done this was immediately hidden from all accounts. He must not be known to exist. After all, I did kill the man with my bare hands, All Might said, as Izuku in the memory recoiled from the information. Everyone watching the memory looked on in horror as they looked at Izuku, who was looking far away from the situation at the moment. The boy looked like he had gone catatonic with how he was listening to this entire thing again. It really did hurt him to make him incapable of speaking at the moment. Rouge had walked over to the boy and sat next to him as she looked at the memory as it continued onward from the entire problems of the number 1 hero's destroyed form. Now to answer that question of yours. Do I think that someone without a quirk could become a hero? No. No, I should think not. There are many other ways of becoming a hero to someone else. You could become a doctor, firefighter, or even a police officer. The police get harassed because they put away the villains that we heroes capture, but they are the ones who actually put the villain behind bars. It's all right to dream, kid. Just make sure that it's attainable, realistic. See you later, young man. All Might spoke as Izuku and All Might in the memory faded. Looking back at Izuku, who looked to be outright crying over the memory again, Rouge decided to give the bunny a hug as he just stayed still. But eventually his eyes regained their color as he let out a massive wail of agony and mental anguish, hugging Rouge back, putting his face on her shoulder. She watched as the tears flowed from his eyes down her shoulder, letting out a sigh before wrapping the small, shivering bunny with her wings as she walked away, able to pick him up with ease. The others looked at how skinny the boy really was as they could see some of his ribs from how skinny he looked, and one Rouge left the room with Izuku in her arms still crying. Sally and the others looked at one another before glaring at Sonic. You will be apologizing for your actions towards him. He clearly hadn't had a very good life before coming here. For God's sake, this was his first week living in our world, and he's not only helped us nonstop, but he assisted in saving the world clearly all on his own, Sally said, as Amy and the others nodded. Hey, what are we going to do with him anyway? He is going to need a place to live, Sonic said, as Sally smirked. Place him in the care of Vanilla and Cream. Since they are rabbit people, they can help him gain some muscle and other parts of what he really looks like, Amy said, as she and the others left the room. Wow, and here I thought I was the villain. To see that the boy had a villain even worse than I was. All I want is to help people adjust to live with technology and have a slight kink in turning animals into robots, Robotnik said, leaving the room causing Tails and Sonic to gag. Chapter 7. Chapter Summary. Izuku meets Vanilla and Cream. Izuku gets a kiss from a lustful bat. Rouge was pulling Izuku along as they walked through the main base of the Freedom Fighters. She had been listening to him sniffle to himself quietly as he silently cried, his wailing of sadness long over, but still tears fell from his eyes to the point she thought that he had the superpower of crying tremendously without losing water. She smiled down at him before rubbing the area between his ears on top of his head, before noticing something very weird about him. Whilst she rubbed his hair offhandedly, he leaned into her touch. It was almost as though aside from the love he got from his own mother, he was extremely touch-starved when it came to others. She shook her head at that though. There was no way he wasn't in close proximity with women of his world, since he had a school. Although now that she thought about that, most if not all of the people in his school were highly abusive towards him, emotionally and very physically. Sighing, she just helped him into her vehicle that she had bought with the money she had stolen from most people she came across. With him sitting in the passenger seat of the vehicle, she decided to bring the bunny boy over to someone she knew for a fact could get him back to what his memories portrayed him as before the whole superpower thing in his world became a thing. Vanilla the rabbit and Cream the bunny were just the people for her to bring Izuku to, since they both recently discovered the loss of Vanilla's husband and Cream's father. So having another male around the house was bound to get them something back in terms of their family. Shaking her head at the very lewd thought of Izuku getting in a relationship with Vanilla and becoming Cream's new father figure in her life, she drove off towards Night Carnival Zone, the place where all chows and the rabbits live in peace with the robots that patrol the area there. It had recently become freedom fighter territory since Sally and her allies had liberated the rabbits from taking care of all of Robotnik's little projects there. The drive was long-lasting for the two as Izuku kept his gaze outside of Rouge's vehicle. The bat focused her time on driving instead of talking as she knew Izuku wasn't in a talkative mood at the moment since his life before Mobius had been revealed in such a half-baked kind of way. But about a few hours after being on the road, the two finally arrived at Night Carnival Zone and drove through the dark streets of the zone looking for Vanilla's home within the place. Eventually, Rouge found the home and stopped her vehicle in the driveway of the house before getting out of the vehicle, helping Izuku out of the vehicle since he had slept for a majority of the car ride there. They stumbled about before finally reaching the front door of the rabbit household and knocked on the door. Knock, knock. A hum from inside the house was heard between the two Mobians as they waited for the woman to arrive at the front door. And as soon as the door was opened, Izuku was gifted a sight that seemed very adorable for him as he stared at the two in front of himself. In Vanilla's arms, Cream was seen slowly falling asleep as she mumbled about wanting to stay awake to make some cake with her mother. Izuku smiled at the little girl in his still not fully awake stupor as Rouge spoke up for him and Vanilla as the taller woman had noticed Izuku's features. "Hello, Vanilla. Nice to see you again," Rouge said, smirking. "Oh, good evening to you as well, Rouge. Is there anything I can do for you?" The tall rabbit asked. "I just need you to take care of the little greenie here. He just arrived on Mobius a few days ago, and he's gone through some rough things where he came here from. Is it all right if Greenie stays here with you and Cream until he gets his own home?" Rouge asked. "Oh, the boy could stay here as long as he'd like. Just be sure to stay out of trouble. That is my only rule," Vanilla said, as Izuku felt something in his chest tighten. "I can stay here? As long as I want?" Izuku asked, his quirkless mentality showing its colors again. "Of course, you may be a green bunny, but it's not something I've ever had to deal with alone before. I mean, just look at Cream here," Vanilla said, as she pulled Cream out of her arms. Mama, I want to go to bed," Cream complained softly. "Cream, we are getting a new resident. Say hello to, what's your name again?" Vanilla said, before questioning Izuku. "Midoriya Izuku, ma'am," Izuku replied as the woman smiled. "Don't call me ma'am, it makes me feel old. Just call me Vanilla," she said, as Izuku nodded. "Midoriya? Is that a name from another country?" Cream asked, a little curious. "Why, yeah, I come from a planet where my people say our last names first," Izuku said, as Cream smiled. Whilst Cream pulled Izuku inside the house, Vanilla stared at the two before looking back at Rouge. She saw the bat-like woman just watching Izuku play around with the sleepy Cream without any kind of knowledge of how to treat children, and he was doing it like a pro would. Rouge smiled at the information she'd been seeing before looking up at Vanilla with a grim expression, catching the rabbit woman off guard. Rouge never gained a grim expression unless something bad had happened recently. "Is there something you wish to tell me, Rouge?" Vanilla questioned. "Yeah, the boy. Izuku. He holds a lot of baggage under all his kindness. He wears his kindness like it's a mask covering the pain he holds underneath it. If he ever snaps at you or Cream, just don't hold it against him. He didn't get many outlets in dealing with his anger. Now that he's in our world, he will be getting plenty of chances to vent out his frustrations with his previous life. He was human before coming here, by the way," Rouge said, before turning to walk away. "A human, you say? How did he become like my people then?" Vanilla asked. "Me and Knuckles believe it has something to do with the Chaos Emeralds, or the Master Emerald. He was brought to our world for a reason, and I intend to make sure that he stays safe in this world far away from the machinations of Dr. Eggman. Only those of Sonic and his friends would know the pain of suffering that kid has gone through," Rouge said, preparing to leave. "Rouge," Izuku's voice called out. "Yeah? What's up, Dash?" Rouge went to ask before she was interrupted with a hug from the green bunny. "Thank you for doing this for me. I've never been given this amount of kindness before. Will I see you again?" Izuku thanked before asking. "Yeah, just make sure that you keep your eye on the news bunny boy," Rouge said, before kissing him on the cheek. Equals 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 equals. Standing in the driveway of the rabbit household, Izuku just watched as Rouge got into her car and drove off to wherever she lived. He pulled a hand over to his face before placing a couple fingers on the spot where Rouge had kissed him on his cheek before his face suddenly erupted in a blushing mess as he heard Vanilla giggle. Turning to the woman, he saw that it was already too late as the rabbit woman had already taken multiple pictures of his face, as well as reaction to being kissed by the lovable bat. He looked at Vanilla with a very concerned expression before Vanilla spoke to him again, garnering his full attention. "I won't be showing it to anyone. Don't worry about the pictures. I only place them in picture books," Vanilla said, rubbing his head. Sorry, I just never had been kissed that way by a G-girl before," Izuku said, his cheeks blushing still. "Don't worry, when we're done with you, you will be the one flirting with her," Vanilla said, with a very sly smirk on her face. I don't like her like that. I just met her like why yesterday?" Izuku replied in a tone that was filled with embarrassment. "And it's already showing how much you like that batsy of a woman. I didn't take you for someone who was into bad girls," Vanilla said, pulling him inside the house to play with Cream. Mental problems cannot be messed with. Chapter Summary. Izuku has a mental breakdown from the number of things that have happened. Plus a day has passed since arriving at the Vanilla Rabbit household. Izuku went to bed inside of Vanilla's home on the couch. He had made it adamant that when the time comes, he will leave her home so that he could strike out on his own. He didn't want to burden the family with anything about his problems. He may be a rabbit Mobian, but that didn't mean that his human characteristics were completely wiped away. Falling asleep was something that came naturally to him when he was in a place he would call safe, but overall, he had no dreams of his life before coming to Mobius. It was all just a peaceful slumber that was brought to surging life with a dream that was actually good for once. Although in the dream he was blushing up a storm since he was standing before Rouge, and she was barely wearing anything. He would wake up the next morning as he looked down at the blanket, noticing something very odd. Last time he checked, his groin was not that large, much less actually lifting the blanket off of his chest slightly from its height. Shaking his head and getting those lewd thoughts out of his mind, Izuku entered the shower of the home and made sure to put the water on extremely cold water so that he could get his erection down. He really didn't want Vanilla and Cream to see his morning would like that at some point in the morning. He really wouldn't live that one down. And considering the fact that he was technically still in school, he had to walk Cream over to her school so that she could continue to learn there, although he made sure to be nearby whenever something happened. He was currently searching for a job for himself to take. He didn't have much skills for others to use in this world, but he'd be damned if he was going to make himself a burden on another family that he'd come across who just wished to help him. So as he searched for jobs earlier on in the day, it wasn't until later on in the evening when he returned back to the household with Vanilla and Cream that the two ran up to him worried as can be. "Izuku, are you all right? We were worried for you," Vanilla asked, looking him over for injuries. "I am fine. Jay just looking for a J job," Izuku muttered as he sat down on the couch. "Dear, you're too young to have a job," Vanilla said, as Izuku shook his head. I don't want to be a burden on another family. I was already one for my real mom. I don't want to take your home for granted," Izuku replied as Vanilla's expression softened. "Izuku, we won't be kicking you out of our home. You were one of us the moment you were brought here," Vanilla said, as Izuku shook his head. That's the thing though. I feel like a fraud," Izuku said, not realizing that he was yelling. "I was brought here because of some random event in my world. I didn't even have a choice in the matter. And then I was brought into this world looking like one of you. Be but green instead," Izuku said, his mind slowly breaking. "Izuku, please don't yell. I'm sure that we can come up with some way to make sure that you don't feel like you're a burden," Vanilla said, as she placed her hands up where he could see them, slowly moving towards him as though he were a wild animal. But that's the thing. I don't know how not to feel like burden. I felt like I was one for my whole entire life," Izuku said, as he paced around the room. From Vanilla's point of view, the fact that Izuku was pacing meant that something was about to happen, and it wouldn't be good if Izuku were to continue spiraling through his mental anguish as she slowly approached him. And even though he was walking back and forth, she knew he kept a close eye on how close she was. Once she was right in front of him, She noticed how his body instinctually trembled as she towered over him in height before she took a knee to be around his height. Placing a hand in front of his eyes, she moved it slowly over to his shoulder, watching as his eyes were very keen on watching the offending limb move towards it cautiously, as though she were about to hurt him. Seeing him acting in a way that was too cautious for someone of his age, Vanilla felt a tear fall down her face before she softly wrapped the arm around his body, pulling the boy slowly into an embrace as she rubbed his back. Vanilla felt the boy stiffen under her hug and for a moment feared that he wouldn't take her loving embrace. But that was when he just fell to his own knees as he sobbed relentlessly in her hold, his entire form trembling as he sobbed. I don't know what to do. I was told, for my entire life, that I was in nothing but a useless waste of space. But here, I was shown a kindness I'd never thought I'd get from your people. Izuku sobbed. Don't worry, Izuku, what you need right now is comfort. But after today, you will be coming with me to meet someone who can help you with your mental problems, Vanilla said, not really knowing the problems Izuku was suffering. Cream was feeling left out of this emotional moment as she ran towards the two and leaped into their embrace as well. For about 2 hours, Izuku would continue to cry in their hugs before he slowly pulled away from the two of them, and he couldn't help but feel embarrassed for showing them a side that he never showed anyone. So as he stood up and stared into their eyes, he asked them both a question that he knew that they'd most certainly answer with kindness and compassion. I know that I am not mentally okay, but that's fine, and I would like to ask you both, if you could help me? Izuku said, looking into both Vanilla's and Cream's eyes. Of course we would help you, Izuku. Isn't that what a family is meant to be? Vanilla asked. I don't know what a family is supposed to do. And I never were around, Izuku said, shuffling his foot on the ground. In Vanilla's mind, as soon as that sentence came out of Izuku's mouth, glass broke. New hobbies. Worried rabbits. Chapter summary. Vanilla has a small moment to show her motherly side. Izuku shows Vanilla his skills with a musical instrument, and Izuku gets adopted by Vanilla the rabbit. After hearing Izuku talk about how he never really knew how a family should act with one another, he never expected that he'd be pulled into a deep hug as he felt Vanilla tremble over him. Having the older rabbit pull him into a hug was something he'd never prepared for, not to mention that the rabbit was very beautiful in his eyes, as well caused him to lock up in place as he froze. And as the older rabbit had kept him locked in her hug, she felt him trembling slightly before she pulled her head away from his head and looked into his eyes, as she saw the complete confusion as well as building tears in his eyes. Let it be known that Vanilla cared very much for her daughter Cream, but right now, this little rabbit needed the attention of a mother. Not just any mother, but a mother who actually cared about the fact that their son is all alone in a different dimension, as well as a mother who actually shows care to that of a child. So as she pulled a palm over to his cheek, she watched as he watched the offending limb very closely before it was softly placed on his cheek as his eyes immediately looked into her eyes. That was when she decided to speak to him in a motherly tone that caused his heart to slowly wilt. I don't know about you, Izuku, but hearing the fact that your own mother, your own flesh and blood, not even caring about you, is just heartbreaking. Who was your mother to make you think that she'd never care about you? Vanilla asked, concern etched into her very skin. As someone who didn't care about me. As she found out that I was quirkless and stopped caring for me, Izuku said, as Vanilla pulled him into her bosom. The fact that he couldn't say one good thing about his mother showed the kind of woman his previous mother was. She was a very disgraceful and very neglectful person and shouldn't have ever been given the right to be called mom. But that was then, and there was nothing Vanilla could do about it other than help bring this boy to his full potential. And as she stared into his large emerald eyes, she made that decision right then and there. Izuku, how would you like to be shown what a family should really look like? How they should act towards one another, how they talk to one another, how they need to be there for one another when they aren't feeling good, and other things that families do? Vanilla asked, as Izuku stood in her warm hold. I think that I'd like that, Izuku said, as his tears started to fall. When was the last time you ever felt any kind of love from your mother, Izuku? Vanilla asked, concerned. I hadn't ever felt a motherly hug since I was around 4. Izuku said, as he felt even more tears fall from his eyes. Because now that he thought about it, since he was 3 years old, since when has his mother even given him a hug? When had she even shown that she even cared about his safety whenever he came home with burns, scars as well as a broken leg or arm in the past? He had counted far too many times that the person who was supposed to be his mother, becoming more and more neglectful towards him since his quirkless diagnosis, even going as far as beating on him when he came home whenever the school told her about a bad grade. Unknown to Izuku in this moment, he was muttering all these things out under his breath as Vanilla held him in her arms. They had long since went from standing in the middle of the room to sitting on the couch as the older woman had pulled him into her side as she rubbed his hair. She was listening to him list things down at what his mother had done to him as they began to become overwhelmingly alarming to Vanilla. To hear that a mother, who was supposed to protect their child, beat on them after coming home for just a bad grade? That wasn't a mother. That was an abusive person who wanted power in their own little world. It wasn't much longer before Vanilla heard the telltale sniffles and sobs that came from Izuku's form as he began to cry even more about his situation. Not to mention the fact that Vanilla was showing more motherly traits that he'd never clearly seen from his mother, who was more of a neglectful, abusive parent than a loving and caring one. Vanilla then heard Izuku's answer to her earlier question as the boy looked up into her eyes as he looked incredibly small to her in that moment, like a little bunny rabbit after being born a few days prior. If I'm in not much of a bee burden on your family. Then I'd like to become a part of yours. Izuku said, as Vanilla smiled. Well then, let's get you registered tomorrow. I would like to have your last name changed to mine. That way you can forget that life you lived. Nobody should have to live their life through such pain and suffering only to be tossed aside as though you were nothing more than a toy for a child to play with, Vanilla said, as Izuku hugged her hip once more. Equals 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 equals. After heading to bed that evening, Vanilla decided to call Sonic and friends. She knew that most of them would probably be asleep at this point in time, but she wanted to let them know about Izuku's situation at the moment so that they could know what was going on. And as she pulled out her phone in her bedroom, she called Tails, knowing the young fox would be working on something this late in the evening. She walked through the house as she stood just outside of Izuku's bedroom that she prepared for him early on in the day for his arrival as the phone connected to the other side. Vanilla? What is you calling me in the middle of the night? Tails asked, curious. Tails, you should know something about Midoriya-kun, Vanilla said, as Tails became more serious on the other line. Okay. Is there something that needs to be done about him? Tails asked. I'm going to be adopting him tomorrow. I went through a very dark conversation last night with the boy, and he's more hurt inside than he's letting on. Has he even told you all about his relationship with his mother from the world he came from? Vanilla informed. We saw memories with a device that I created with Eggman. But other than that, we never saw any memories about his family life. That isn't our problem to deal with right now, Tails said, before changing his wording. I mean that we didn't see it as something we should ask him about. He was very guarded about his past when we showed his memories. Especially so after the talk we had after Lord X had left our world just a few days ago. Tails informed as Vanilla let out a hum. Well, the reason he wasn't as keen on telling you all about it was because he just met you all. So I can see why he didn't wish to tell you. But in our conversation earlier tonight, he was deeply hurt by his biological mother, Vanilla said, as Tails gave a nervous hum. Was he abused? Tails asked, after a minute of silence. From what he mentions, it was mostly neglect, but it became outright abuse when he didn't come home with a good grade, Vanilla said, sighing as she sat down on the couch. That's not how a mother should react to getting a bad grade. Tails muttered on his end of the line. That's not all, Tails. I'm not sure if he told you this, but from his body language alone, she wasn't the only one who abused him. I'm not sure if it was his father, but from what he looked like when I tried to get him to look me in the eye earlier, he watched my hand very closely, as though he expected that he'd be attacked, Vanilla said, as Tails grumbled off and away from the phone. Of course we have someone who is mentally screwed up. Did he say anything about how he got to our world? Anything that could be of use? Tails asked. Not that I know of. He never mentioned anything about that. He's currently sleeping in the bedroom. I will be getting him some things tomorrow to help him settle in the home, and I will have him take Cream to school tomorrow, Vanilla said, as Tails gave a good hum. That's good. Having him connect with Cream on a mental level will allow him to bond with her. Tails informed as Vanilla spoke up. That's the funny part. He's already seeing Cream as a little sister. Vanilla giggled. How so? Tails questioned. Cream just climbed into his bed with him. She's cuddling up to him as he holds her still, Vanilla said, as she looked at Cream snuggling up to Izuku's sleeping frame. Well, inform us if there's anything else we should be worried about, Tails said, as he hung up the phone. Damn it, Tails. Get out of that stupid workshop and fuck me already? A feminine voice rang out upstairs. Crap baskets. Equals 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 equals. The next morning, Izuku found himself holding Cream close to his chest as the little girl was sleeping soundly in his arms. He found himself giving the girl a hug and rubbing his head on hers as though he were placing his scent on her. Not for anything too lewd, mind you. Just to make sure that anyone thinks about hurting her that someone else is keeping watch over her. He'd read it in an article one time in his world that bunnies and rabbits tended to rub against one another to calm their nerves. Not to mention to make sure any other enemies knew that they were not to be messed with. Again, he didn't know how true that comment was, but he decided to just leave it be before climbing out of the bed. Cream, bless her soul, was still clinging to his shirt as he held her up in the air as he left the bedroom. The way she was curled up like a baby in his arms reminded him of the fact that in his world, his mother had given birth to his baby sister in that world not too long before his death, and he was now really hoping that his mother would be capable of taking care of her without putting the girl through a lot of hardship. He entered the kitchen with Cream as Vanilla glanced over her shoulder and smirked at him before setting up the table as Izuku placed Cream in her own chair. I saw her climb into your bed last night. Make sure that she makes it to school today, all right? Vanilla asked. Sure thing, Vanilla-san, Izuku said, as he rubbed his eyes and yawned. Breakfast will be done in a little bit. How about you take a shower real quick? Vanilla said, as Izuku nodded and left the two girls in the kitchen. Cream took this moment to fully open her eyes as she took in her surroundings. She found her mother looking at her with a smile on her face as Cream smiled back at her mother before she found herself being given something to eat. Once Izuku came back from his shower, Cream had noticed that he'd gone without his shirt this time as she watched him look around the room with a nervous expression on his face as Vanilla smiled. The green fur on you looks great, Izuku. You look like a green rabbit ready to take on his day, Vanilla said, as Izuku looked away. I feel a little embarrassed at how I don't really need to wear clothes in order to not be naked, Izuku said, as Vanilla chuckled. You don't need to conform to our rules in our world. You can wear clothes if you want. It's most of our species that doesn't even really wear clothing except for the males of our species, Vanilla explained as Izuku gave a nod. I've been thinking about living here, and in order to settle down here, I need to learn how to be one of you guys and make it a habit, Izuku said, as he looked at Vanilla. Izuku, you don't need to conform to our society's ways of living, especially since most of us women wear clothes to feel mostly better about ourselves. I think Amy has some things to say about that department. Although, if anything, if you wish to try out our society's customs, I won't stop you. But if you feel too uncomfortable with it, you can tell me about it, Vanilla said, as Izuku gave a nod. As Vanilla gave him some food to start his day, he started to eat it softly before he fully began to eat as much as he could in quick succession. Vanilla did also take note that Izuku's body type was not nearly as built as Sonic and Tails, as she could just barely see the ribs on his chest before she wrote something else in her small notebook about things she picks up from Izuku's body language looks. Looking down at her list, she was becoming very wary about how many things were wrong with him, not to mention that she was planning on taking him to a local doctor in the town, just to see how healthy he really is. She then counted the things she's seen him do that caused her to recognize the problems he was showing her. 1. Slight limp in left leg, probably leftover problems from being hurt badly. 2. Jitters whenever he is alone with others, trained into him. 3. Neglected behavior, isn't aware of most things that others do, sheltered mostly. 4. Glaring amount of wary behavior when in a safe area, trained into him, physically. 5. Remove the fur and there would be different scars and old wounds that were healed over, clear abuse from either peer or family. 6. Trust in authority figures, probably from a life of bullying, not much found on that. 7. Wary of his surroundings, as though waiting for something or someone to appear. 8. No regard for self-preservation, if what Tails and the others told me before he arrived is true. Looking at these notes, Vanilla felt a stray tear fall down her face as she heard Izuku and Cream leave through the front door. Once the door was clicked shut, she fell to her knees as she looked at the notes with something akin to pure hatred and fear. To see that she had to write this down meant that mentally he was very screwed up to the point that it would take for her to literally train those things out of him. Aside from the limp in his leg, from her mediocre knowledge about medicine, the fact that he still had a limp in his leg meant that it didn't heal correctly. She then decided to prepare his room with things that she could find in the garage with items she'd found inside that used to belong to her late husband. She stopped when she found an old wooden guitar that needed some new strings, and with Izuku and Cream gone, she left to get some new strings thinking that the boy would like it. It could be a showing that she really cares for him. She was only gone for a few hours as she grabbed another new guitar as well using some rings she'd found along the way so that the boy could use 2 different guitars in the event one broke. By the time Izuku had returned back from taking Cream to school, she heard him coming towards the bedroom that she was setting up entirely for him. Once he entered the room where she was setting up everything, she looked at him with a smile as she saw him eyeing the guitars in the corner of the room. He reached out for one of the guitars as he began to thrum his fingers along the chords before looking up at her, to which she nodded her head at him as she took a seat at a nearby chair. Vanilla watched as Izuku tuned the guitar until he got it to where he liked it. She watched as a ghost of a smile appeared on his face as he began to play a small melody in the moment before he began to sing softly, and she knew right then and there that he could become a very good singer. And he chose a good song. Not that she'd heard it before as he began with a small beginning few notes as he began to get further into it. It sounded a little wonky due to it being a guitar doing the beginning where she believed a piano would have better off here. /n This is the link to the song. Hope you enjoy my suffering of writing each and every lyric, although I prefer hearing sad songs in general. https://www.youtube.com/watch?. V equals MK3 Zycam guy. Heart beats fast. Colors and promises how to be brave. How can I love when I'm afraid to fall? But watching you stand alone, all of my doubt suddenly goes away somehow. 1 step closer. I have died every day waiting for you, darling. Don't be afraid, I have loved you. For 1,000 years, I'll love you for 1,000 more. Izuku stopped as he began to sing the second verse, and his strumming went from swift and precise to soft and low once again. Vanilla was sitting in front of him with R written on her expression as she smiled at the boy. She knew that he had a good talent that he could use, and she was wanting to hear more about it. That was when Izuku began to sing the second verse of the song. Time stands still, beauty, and all she is, I will be brave. I will not let anything take away what's standing in front of me. Every breath, every hour has come to this 1 step closer. I have died every day waiting for you, darling. Don't be afraid, I have loved you for 1,000 years, loved you for 1,000 more. And all along I believed I would find you. Time has brought your heart to me. I have loved you for 1,000 years. I'll love you for 1,000 more. Izuku stopped right there as he began to continue using the guitar to bring the part of the chorus to an end. He continued strumming the chords as he knew there was another part to the song left over, and the song he was singing was to his baby sister that was still in his old world, the one he gave up for this place. Vanilla noticed that the boy's eyes were now watering as he sniffled a little as he began the third and final part of the song. As she found herself kneeling in front of Izuku, a palm on his lap as she stared into his eyes, his heartbroken and hurt expression showing through in the song he was playing and singing at the moment. 1 step closer. 1 step closer. I have died every day waiting for you, darling. Don't be afraid, I have loved you. For 1,000 years I'll love you, for 1,000 more. And all along I believed I would find you. Time has brought your heart to me. I have loved you. For 1,000 years I'll love you, for 1,000 more. As Izuku continued to strum the chords, he started to slow down until he reached the end of the song before he did one last strum to end it off. Slowly putting the guitar to the side, he placed a hand over his mouth as he started to sob unintentionally as he began to think about his baby sister that he'd unintentionally left behind to be killed off. An innocent child that was left to Lord X's doing whatever the deity was planning on doing to his home world. He was now seriously regretting having the deity take his planet and home for himself at this point, as Vanilla pulled him into another hug, which he was now counting that this is around the 4th or 5th time he'd been hugged since he got here. That was a beautiful song. Where did you learn it? Vanilla asked, as Izuku looked away, tears still falling from his eyes. I'd learned how to use a G guitar when I passed by a small musician store owned by a family called the Giros. They taught me how to sing as well as play instruments. They were like the second family I wish I had, aside from you, of course. Izuku said, trying to not make the rabbit angry. Don't worry about me, Izuku. I know how you're feeling right now. But don't worry about that right at this point in time. I hope you're ready to become my child in all but blood. In the eyes of the law, mind you. Vanilla said, as Izuku nodded. Vanilla then pulled out a small folder that held an image of his bunny-eared form, smiling at a nearby camera. How the woman got that, he had no clue, but he shook his head and saw the line at the bottom asking him for his signature to be officially named Izuku the Rabbit. And raising a hand, he slowly moved his hand over to the paper and signed his first name on it, as Vanilla had stopped him from writing his last name out of habit. There, you should play the instruments in the room for some time while I get this finalized. I think Cream would like to hear you sing sometime, though, Vanilla said, standing up, stretching and leaving the room with a smile on her face. Please, drop by the archive and comment to let the creator know if you enjoyed their work.